Advanced Algebra, Chapter 1, Lesson 3. We've been talking about solving equations that have just variables in them and then looking at restrictions. So in this video, I'm going to do 5 or 6 examples for you, and so hopefully this will be helpful to you. Now, one of the reasons we do this is that when you go and do your sciences, your advanced algebra, that's what this class is, your physics or your chemistry, those types of things, there's a lot of solving equations that don't have any numbers in them, solving formulas. You have formulas for pressure, formulas for distance, or these different formulas that you would use, and being able to manipulate those equations to solve them for the one unknown that you're trying to determine is a very valuable and needed skill. So this is a kind of a crossover lesson. It should help you when you do your sciences. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go through and do the 4 steps that we've talked about when solving equations. Even though they all don't apply, it's good to, excuse me, don't want to do that in the microphone, but sorry. It's good just to practice these so you always get in the habit of thinking about these 4 things as you're doing your equations and we don't forget anything. Okay, so step 1 was we simplify each side of the equations. We look at both sides. We distribute if we have to get rid of parentheses, and then we add like terms. So as I look at this equation, I equals PRT, there are no parentheses, so no need to distribute, and there are no like terms, so I can go to step 2, and that was then to remove fractions. No fractions here, so I can go ahead and go to step 3. And that is to gather any term that has the variable in it that I'm solving for to one side. I'm solving for r, and anything that has an r is already on one side, so we go right to the last step, which is to then go ahead and divide. So we need to divide by everything that we don't want. So we need to divide by p. The p's reduce, but again, property of equality, have to do it to both sides. And then I go ahead and divide by t, because that takes care of that. Then I go ahead and have my equation solve for r. R is by itself. I is equal to p divided by t. So this would be the equation solved for r. Now I want you to notice I did one thing here. I applied a property that's in that list of properties that was in your book and we showed you in the video, but we didn't really talk about it, and I said we would as we use it. Notice that my original equation had I on the left and the r was on the right, and my answer I have r on the left and everything else is on the right. How did I do that? Well, I applied what we call the symmetric property, and symmetric, think about symmetry, it looks the same on both sides. What I did was I just took everything that was on the left and everything that was on the right, and I just switched sides. And I can do that applying the property, a symmetric property. And the reason I do that is because as a mathematical convention, we've talked about conventions in other videos, we like to have the variable that we're solved for on the left. So we always have this on the left. So in order to make it look like every other answer that we do, we use a symmetric property to do that. Now, this problem does not ask you for restrictions, but what would the restriction be if I did ask you for it? What's that one phrase I told you to remember? The denominator cannot be 0, right? So then I take my denominator, substitute it in for the word denominator, so pt could not be 0 would be the restriction if I was asked for it, because that's the only fraction in any of my steps. Okay? Alright, let's look at another one that's fairly easy. And again, this is a formula. Volume is equal to length times width, and we want to solve for w. So again, we're going to go through our steps, and I'm going to talk very quickly, but just, you know what they are, so follow along. Okay, so distribute and simplify. Nothing to do on either side. No fractions. Everything with a w is on one side, so I go ahead and divide. So I divide by L. I divide by H. And then I can go ahead and apply the symmetric property and move the variable I solve for R over to the left, and this one on the right. So here's my formula. W, or the width of this item, is equal to the volume of the item divided by its length and height. Okay, and again, it doesn't ask for restrictions, but if it did, my denominator cannot be 0. Okay, next example. Okay, we're going to solve for b sub 2. b sub 2 is in parentheses, so we're going to follow our steps. First step is to distribute and simplify. So I have this, so I have this whole thing here. This is all one term. I'm going to distribute. So 1/2. Oh, I have this. Hang on a second. I have this formula totally written wrong. We should have the right formula if we're going to do this right. The area, this is the formula for the area of a trapezoid, by the way. 1/2 height b1 plus b2. There we go. All right, so this is one term, so I'm going to distribute that into here. So A is equal to 1/2 h times b sub 1. That's just distributed. And then I distribute this plus 1/2 h times b sub 2. Okay, then I add like terms. Now these are not like terms. They're very close to being like terms, but remember, to be like terms, all the variables have to be exact. This is b sub 1, this is b sub 2, so they're not exact, so I can't do anything else. Then the next step is to remove fractions. And notice I have a fraction here, denominator of 2, denominator of 2. So what's the common denominator that I can multiply everything by that's going to take care of that fraction is 2. So I got to multiply this term by 2. If I multiply this term by 2, and I multiply this term by 2. So remember, every term, not just the ones with fractions, every term. So this is going to leave me 2a. And then the 2 times 1/2, these are going to reduce to 1, leaving me then just h times b sub 1. And then this 1/2 times this 2 is going to leave me h times b sub 2. So then my next step is to gather everything that has just that one term that I'm solving for to one side. So I'm solving for b sub 2, that's right here. There aren't any more b sub 2, so I need to get this by itself. So I'm going to move this term over so I leave this one by itself. So I do that by applying the subtraction property. And then I'm solving for b sub 2, so now I divide this by h, which means I have to solve or divide this whole side by h. So symmetric property, move this over here. So 2a minus, whoops, not equals, come on, minus h b sub 1 over h would be my final answer. And then I would go ahead back and look for any restrictions. No variables in denominator here, 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 here. I do have one here, so the only thing here was h could not be 0. Now I'm going to do one more thing here very quickly that we haven't talked about. It's kind of an algebraic thing you should know, and it kind of understand what this actually means. This is actually two fractions in one. Okay? And what you can do in a situation like this, you can take 2a and put it over the denominator. That's one of the fractions. Minus, and then you can take this and put it over here. So I have h b sub 1 over h. And the reason that I want to do that is a lot of times if I do that, there's a little bit more simplification here that I can do. I can't simplify this anymore, so I'm going to leave that. However, because this is all multiplication, I can go ahead and reduce that. So I'd have b sub 1. So this would actually be an even more simplified answer than this. I'm going to talk a lot more about this later on in other lessons, but just so you know, this might be the answer you see in the book, and that's how they got that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. And here I'm going to need to solve for x and do my restrictions. So again, we're going to do our fourth step. So if I have parentheses, I want to distribute. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute 2/5 x plus 2/5 equals g. Okay, that's just distributing. I look for like terms. There aren't any. Next step is remove fractions. So here I have a common denominator of 5. So if I multiply everything by 5, okay, the 5's are going to reduce to 1, leaving me 2 times x. The 5's are going to reduce, leaving me 2. 5 times g is 5g. Sorry, I did that again. Okay, we're solving for x, so I would remove fractions, which I just did. Then I go ahead and get the term that I'm solving for by itself. So I have 2x, so I'm going to subtract 2 so that that x is by itself. And then I can go ahead and divide everything by 2 because it's going to do this. Now, remember on the last problem I was talking about when you divide by, I had that one fraction and I split it into 2. Well, here's why it works too. Remember in multiplication, like I did up here, I multiplied every term by 5 in order to get the fractions. That's the multiplication property of equality. Division property of equality says I have to divide everything by 2. So if I divide this by 2, divide this by 2, and divide this by 2, that's actually what I'm doing. So here I would have 5/2 g minus, and then I reduce this fraction. This would be 1, so this would be my final answer. The shortcut, or what leaves us in that situation that we had before, was if I divide this by 2 and I divide this whole thing by 2, then that's what I get. Then I split it into the two fractions, and then I end up here. So you can see that's kind of two ways to look at the same problem there. And again, we'll talk more about that as we go through the year, because that's a skill we're going to really need to be good at as well. I think I have one more example here. Yeah, now this one gets a little bit crazier, but remember, just follow our steps and we're going to be good, because they don't change whether we're numbers or letters. So because I have parentheses here, I want to distribute and simplify first. So I have capital R times R sub 1, and then capital R times R sub 2 is equal to R sub 1, R sub 2. So I distribute and add like terms. There are not any like terms here because there are no terms that have the exact same variables. So then I would go ahead and remove fractions. I don't have any. So then I go to my next step, and I want everything that has an R sub 2, because that's what I'm solving for, to be on the same side. So here I have an R sub 2 on this side, and I have an R sub 2 on this side. I need to get them together. So I can do my subtraction property of equality and move this one to the other side. And so I have this. Now I'm in the situation that we talked about before. Before we divide, I have two R sub 2's here, so I can do the distributive property in reverse. So I want to factor out that R sub 2, leaving me this. Now that I've done that, the R sub 2 times this, I can divide this by R sub 1 minus R, because when I do that, this whole thing's going to go away. Okay, and then I can go ahead and I did again. That's not a 1. That's just an R. And then we go ahead and we can do the symmetric property. So R sub 2 is equal to R, capital R, divided by R sub 1 minus capital R. Now, and that would be our final answer. Now again, if I was looking at restrictions, I would go back and look at any step that has fractions with variables. None here, none here, none here. My final answer does. So my restriction would be R sub 1 minus R, my whole denominator, cannot be 0, and that would be the restriction if I was asked. Okay, so there's a few examples. I hope those would be helpful to you. Go ahead and rework those. They are in your homework, and try some of those other ones and make sure you're really good at those. It'll really help you out, not only in this class, but in your science classes as well. Okay? Bye. Stop now. Bye.